Do you know why some people can eat whatever they like, drink whatever they like, and they still stay healthy? Whereas someone else, they try to live a pretty healthy life, yet they always tend to have some type of disease or some symptoms. Well, today I'm going to explain why. This was the fundamental problem that I was confronted with during all of my years in private practice, using natural medicine and naturopathic methods. So, I'm going to go through the 4 key points of my wellness formula. This is going to explain to you why it is that we have these challenges. So, the 4 key points are: number 1, the constitution and your susceptibility. Number 2, stressors. Number 3, health promoters. And number 4, treatment. So, let's start with number 1 to understand how these fit together. So, what is the constitution and your susceptibility? Every one of us have a genetic and an epigenetic constitution that we get from our grandparents, our parents, and our ancestors in general. All of these elements make up how our body is in terms of its resilience, in terms of what areas are strong and what areas are sensitive and other areas that could be weak. These elements then are continually challenged by the stresses of life. All stresses. This can be from the environment, from nutrition, from our work, from people around us, exercise. Take your pick. We live in a life where we are continually faced with change and with stress. And if the stresses of life are greater than the capacity of our constitution, this will then set up what I call a biological imbalance. The body will not be able to maintain its balance, its homeostasis is what we call it in medicine. And when that happens, then the body will try to counteract this imbalance. And this will flare up in terms of symptoms, inflammation, all different types of problems that we'll be faced with. So this is very important to understand. Someone could have grandparents, parents, and an ancestry that has given them a very, very robust, very resilient constitution. And then the stresses of life will not really overly impact their constitution. And so that's the type of person that you will see. They eat pretty much what they like. They live a life that's not necessarily so healthy. Sometimes they even drink alcohol or they even smoke. And yet you will see that these people tend to have very little problem. And the strong constitution is the reason for that. Whereas someone else could have a genetic and epigenetic inheritance where they are more reactive. They have a body that when certain stresses overpower the constitution, the body will react and they will get lots of inflammation. They will have reactionary symptoms. Another individual could have a very sensitive constitution that comes from their past and their family. And they would be very sensitive to all sorts of things. This is the typical type of individual who gets allergic reactions when it comes to the change of season and so on. They're very sensitive. Any little change in stresses tends to put their body into a little bit of an imbalance. And then you also have a constitution that is what I would call a weak constitution. This constitution is very, very susceptible, and they have to be very careful. So even they live a pretty healthy life, you still see that they, with the smallest amount of stress that's out there, they can have some type of problem show up. So this dynamic balance between the constitution and the stresses is the first very fundamental element that you need to go and have a look at. So now, what happens? How do we counteract that? Because there's not a lot that we can do about our constitution. We have what we have. We can, however, help the constitution by controlling stresses. So that's one thing that we can do. We can see that if our constitution is a reactive form, or if our constitution is very sensitive, then we need to pay more attention to the level of stresses of the different categories. The second thing that we can do is we can actually start to strengthen our constitution. So we might have received a constitution from our grandparents and our parents that is a bit sensitive, but we can strengthen it through what I call health promoters. So these are my 5 wellness habits that will actually impact every different system in the body to strengthen the constitution over time, to make the constitution more and more resilient over time. So this is another element that we can bring in. And then, what is treatment for? So the last part of the wellness formula. Treatment is actually there to come in and assist in the short term to give the body a bit of a boost in the short term to bring it back into balance. So I'm going to go a little bit more in depth now, especially in regard to the categories of constitution, the categories of stresses, the categories of health promoters, and the categories of treatment. So let's start. Constitution. The main areas that we have to have a look at is there is a strong, resilient constitution. There is a reactive constitution. There is a sensitive constitution. Or finally, there's a weak constitution. So very importantly, you need to sit down and go through or ask some of your family to help. What was happening with our grandparents and our parents? What are the patterns that they had? And then take our own health history and have a look and see from birth until now, what has been our pattern? Are they matching in certain ways? I'll give you an example. Let's say that our grandparents and parents tended to have some type of trouble showing up in the respiratory system, the lungs, the nose. And now we find that actually as well, we from childhood until now, we tend to also show frequent imbalances that create symptoms and problems in our lungs, like asthma or sinusitis or hay fever. Then we see that there's a link. Then we can realize that, okay, our constitution, a little pattern, is linked to the respiratory system. We need to be more careful about stresses that can influence the respiratory system. So we would have to have a look at what are the type of stresses in the environment that could trigger the respiratory system to go out of balance. So smoking would not be a good one in that example. Pollution would not be a good stressor in that situation. Certain allergic reactions to pollens and things like that would not be a good thing. Stress in that type of situation. So it's very important to start there and pair up the constitution with possible stresses in your life. That then gives you the ability to start to control and bring you back into an element of power. So let me now move on to the stresses. So the main ones are environmental. So everything outside, the air, the pollution, the temperature, whether it is damp or too dry, all of those elements can be a stressor to our constitution. Nutritional. Are we eating foods that stress our system? Do we eat too much sugar? Do we eat too many processed foods? Do we drink the type of things that are very processed and full of additives? Those can be stresses. Physical. Are we exercising or are we sedentary? Are we over-exercising? This is equally a stressor. Some people think, okay, I'm going to start to do a great exercise program, but they overdo it and they actually stress their system out. That can have an impact. Then there can be other elements like alcohol, smoking, drugs. All of these things can act as stresses on the system. Then you also have viruses, bacteria, fungi, mold. All of these things are in the category of stresses. So it's very important is not just to think, okay, I have this symptom, and think of, what medicine is for it. First of all, have a look at what is the cause. What caused the body to go out of this balance in the first place? What stressor actually took the constitution out of that balance and created that biological imbalance in the first place? Then the next step, okay, now I need to go to the health promoters. I've got 5 key health promoters that I always work with. I found these to be fundamental. So starting with the first one, mind. The mind controls the body because your mind is your brain and your nervous system. The brain and the nervous system control pretty much everything in the body. Your hormonal system, your nervous system, your digestive system, everything is controlled by the mind. So it's very important to take your mind and start to cultivate the mind. Nurture your nervous system. Bring your mind and your nervous system back into a state of strength. How do we do that? So I often speak of the inner critic versus the inner carer. Now, most of us, pretty much everybody on the planet, has had some kind of challenge, especially in their early years. And so very often we have this nervous system that is in a survival state. And this survival state forces your nervous system to go into what I call the inner critic. It will always try and protect you, but it overprotects you. And this tends to create these negative messages in your thinking, in your mind. You overly worry. You stress about things that haven't even happened yet. Or you don't want to let go of things from the past. So this inner critic is continually operating. And that has a very negative effect on the body and the constitution. And very often, this can even be linked to the constitution. So you will often see this runs in families. You will see that a grandparent or a parent has a very particular type of way that their mind operates, the way that their inner critic operates. And then you find yourself, wow, now I sound like my dad, or now I sound like my mother. These things are very, very prevalent in terms of the mind. So the best way that you can support your constitution on this nervous system level, on the mind, is to cultivate the inner carer. start to nurture your inner being. Start to realize that nobody's perfect and that we all need to actually nurture this part of ourselves and bring it into balance, make it stronger. Then, after the mind, we go to movement. So all of us today live in a life where we move less than we actually used to in our past. Our ancestors were forced to move. They had to walk. They had to do manual labor. They had to be hunter-gatherer. They were working in the fields. They were doing all sorts of things. So the body was designed to actually move. And movement brings so many benefits. Movement is getting the muscles to be strong. Movement is creating good circulation of the blood flow. Movement is actually de-stressing the body because you're getting rid of excess adrenaline from stress. So movement is so important. Movement starts to get you to operate every system of the body. So movement is another way that you can strengthen your constitution. But, as I mentioned, don't overdo it, okay? You need the right balance, something that you can do regularly every day that strengthens your body over time, rather than being fanatical about something. Then, number 3, nutrition, food. I find that it is very important to realize that most modern people are eating completely in the opposite direction of our ancestors. Even if we go to our grandparents, so we're only speaking about 2 generations, we can clearly see that we are not even eating like our grandparents were eating. Our grandparents were eating a lot less processed food. They were cooking fresh meals every day. They were having a lot of time where they were sitting around a table, eating with socializing in a great environment. All of these things have changed dramatically. So nutrition needs to take into account. We need to get back to a whole natural food type of nutrition. Highly dense nutritional foods that will really, really nourish the body. Protein is number 1. Actually, protein is the one reason why we survive today as a species. There is no First Nations tribe on the planet that did not actively seek out high protein sources. They all had to fish, hunt, seek out animal protein to survive. So protein is the first element that I always encourage everyone to start to control. Up your protein to a level where your hunger naturally will go away. If you get enough protein, you will not be hungry. If you take in enough protein, you will have less cravings. I found that cravings are number 1, a symptom of a lack of protein. It's almost like the body is forcing you to eat because it wants you to find more protein. But in today's world, there is an abundance of so many other types of foods, and we tend to then choose the wrong food, foods that will trigger our dopamine response. So sugar, processed food. So the first thing that I would recommend is bring your nutrition back into our ancient hunter-gatherer style, largely based on animal protein, eggs, fish, red meats. All of these are very, very important. Then bring in, again, natural, good carbohydrates. Carbohydrates like fresh vegetables, fruits that are in season, and always the whole fruit, not juice and these type of things. So whole foods. This will naturally feed your body and you will not be hungry if you have sufficient protein. Then we go to the next level. So, sleep. The body is continually fighting the stress. And if you do not get enough rest and sleep, then you're going to find that your nervous system, your hormonal system, all your organs of the body will not have sufficient time to actually recuperate, recharge, get back into balance. So sleep is so, so important. Make sure that you get to sleep how our ancestors were. They would go to sleep a lot earlier than we did and wake up earlier naturally. So today we've got so many distractions. I would encourage you to try and get to sleep at 10 o'clock. That's 2 hours before midnight. Our body has an instinct with our circadian rhythm, and it really enjoys to make sure that we follow nature's cycle. So if you start to sleep earlier, before midnight, maybe 1 hour before midnight, and then you find 2 hours before midnight, you will naturally wake up earlier in the cycle of the sun, and you'll be far ready for the day. You'll be naturally full of energy. So sleep is vital. Now my last one is breath. Why is breath so important? Well, you can live for 60 days without food. You can live for a few days without water, but you cannot even live for more than a few minutes without air. Oxygen, the gases of life in our atmosphere, are fundamental to our survival, to our life force. So what I often say is you need to breathe life back into your body. Stress often causes you to breathe very shallow. So you're not really getting a very good exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide. Also, deep breathing is going to naturally switch your nervous system into what is called the recovery mode. It's going to switch on that recovery cycle. So every day, it's very important. Make a little bit of time. Breathe really deeply. Switch your system, consciously switch your system back into recovery mode. We do this with everything else in our life. If there's something not going right with our mobile phone or our computer, we will switch it off, switch it back on. We need to start doing the same logic with our body. If our body is not operating correctly, we need to start to realize that we need to reset those deep survival and those deep instinctual messages that happen inside the body. So now we've covered constitution, stresses, and the health promoters. This leads me into the last piece of the puzzle, which is treatment. Treatment is going to be there to give you that little extra boost. And treatment should cover 3 key points. So the first point is symptom control. And this often is the only thing that people focus on. Treatment is there just to help you manage the symptoms because your body has gone out of balance. And so you need to have some form of treatment that is going to help you manage those symptoms so they don't go out of control. If you have an inflammation, you don't want the inflammation to get out of control. If you have pain, you don't want that pain to go out of control. So you're going to need to find a practitioner that is very well skilled and will treat you as an individual. We'll go through the things that I'm speaking about. We'll sit down and say, what was the real cause? And then have a look. What would be the right treatment for this? But symptom is just the first level of treatment. The second level of treatment is you need to correct the underlying imbalance, the underlying biological biochemistry. So treatment should also address that. If it is a particular organ system, for example, if it was the respiratory system, then you need to choose some form of treatment that is going to target that system and is going to strengthen that particular organ system. If it's digestive, it will target digestion. If it is musculoskeletal, you will target that particular system. So you have symptom treatment, you have organ-focused treatment, and then the last thing that I also include in treatment is you need to help the body to reorganize and detoxify what is happening with the biological imbalance. So it needs to help the body to reset itself, improve the mechanisms from the digestive system, to improve the mechanisms from your kidneys, getting waste products out of the body, improve the mechanisms of your liver, make sure that your liver is able to correctly balance what's going on in the body, because there is this underlying biological imbalance. And so as you correct this biological imbalance, you need to help the body clear this out of the system so that it gets stronger and stronger. So these are the elements. The four elements work together, cannot just work on one. And this is what I found, why some individuals would not actually heal correctly. They were normally focused only on one. Very commonly, they're normally only focused on symptom, but they haven't changed anything in terms of the stressor, or they haven't changed anything in terms of a health promoter. And so the symptoms will resolve, but then after the effects of the medication wear off, the symptom returns. The stressor is still there. The health promoter has not been added. They're still eating the way they were eating, or they're still not exercising. Something like that would happen. Equally, you find that sometimes people only focus on the health promoter, and they might only choose one. So you will often hear of someone who says, yeah, I don't understand. I've been running every day. I've been exercising every day, but they haven't controlled the stressor, or they haven't controlled and brought in other health promoters. And then they wonder why the biological imbalance is still there. So this is the thing that people don't realize. And that's why I'm actually wanting to pass this knowledge on. You know, this is now my over 30 years in wellness and natural medicine. And I'm at the stage of my life, being 60 now, that I want to pass this on. I want to create some kind of legacy and pass on the knowledge that I've gained over the years. So it's very important for me that more people start to realize this about their wellness and their health. Get back to basics. Discover your constitution. Have a look at what is created in your own genetics, your own epigenetics, what happened in your own health history. Have a look at the stresses in your life. What are they? Which are the ones that are out of balance? What are the health promoters that you need? Which ones are you forgetting? Maybe overly focusing on one, but not really looking at the others. You don't have to be perfect, but it's better to be balanced and consistent than to be perfect in one and then forgetting about the others. And then lastly, in those times when you do go out of balance, find the right type of practitioner. It can be normal modern medicine. It can be natural medicine. It can be herbal medicine. We all are individuals. We need to find what works well with our body. Some people respond very, very well to nutritional medicine. Some people respond very, very well to herbal medicine. I always advise that you need to listen to what is working. The body is very, very quick to react and respond when you give it what it needs. So it's not something that you need to guess. If you start on something and it already moves in a positive direction, then you're on the right track. I hope that this gives a very good understanding of why I wrote my book on the wellness formula. And it becomes a little bit more clear as to how these pieces of the puzzle fit together. If you are interested in this, to go have a look at my newsletter and podcast, which is on Substack. The link will be below. Take a read, take your time. It's completely free. You can go and read it, see how it works with you. In addition to that, if you want to go a little bit deeper, I also have created the Get Real Wellness app. It's an iPhone iOS app. And what it does is it will help you to integrate these health promoters into your life. The 5 different health promotion aspects I have in there, and you can then set a goal for each one of those 5 health promoters to get you on track, to motivate you and hold you accountable. And then equally, if you have any question, I've taken all of my knowledge, I've taken all of my protocols, my book, and I've trained an AI on all of this knowledge. So you may have a question. You're like, well, Dr. Chase, what if I have a question? Well, that's what the app is there for. You can go and ask the AI assistant, and it will give you some advice specific to what you're asking. I don't know what you're going to need, so it will help you by answering your question. Great. So I look forward to continuing this journey. The next step from here is I'm going to be continuing the podcast on Substack. And in that area, we're going to be breaking down the 10 most common health problems that people are confronted with. And we're going to break that into the constitution, stressors, health promoters, and treatment for each particular health problem, so that you can see practically how does this framework operate, and you can start to learn from that. My whole mission at the moment is to give you the information to empower you so that you can create wellness in your life. So thank you for today, and see you in the next one. Bye for now.